All right. Well, hello everyone. Good Wednesday evening. I am meteorologist Scotty Powell with Burke Weather here, and you are watching another Carolina's Weather Group discussion, and you're only seeing myself and Chris Michaels. That's because everybody is either having issues with technology or they're just running late for the program tonight. But I promise you, we will have a program with other than Chris and myself. So. Um, Anyways, I told Chris, I was like, "You're the TV guy, so you can help me fill this time frame." Tonight's discussion is about the 2014, excuse me, summer in review. We're going to kind of talk about what summer was like for Tennessee and North Carolina, South Carolina, and even Georgia tonight. As one of our guests is from Augusta, Georgia, and it was very diverse in different locations where. Chris actually seen some more warm and sunny days rather than we did here in North Carolina. So we'll get into that tonight as we discuss the topic. Along with Chris, we're going to have Brad Panovich on from NBC Charlotte. Also, Rich Rogers from Savannah, Georgia. No, I'm not. I've said Savannah all day. Augusta, Georgia. He's going to be in from Augusta, Georgia. So he's actually having issues right now with the internet, so hopefully we can get him on shortly. Joey and Daniel and Ricky are all running late, so they'll be able to join us here in just a little bit as well. So, actually, Chris, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself. I know a lot of our followers have seen you on here numerous times, so I don't know how much introduction you need because they probably already know you. But I'll let you go ahead and kind of introduce yourself and talk about your forecast area and your background and your dog's name, whatever you want to talk about right now.
Yeah, I mean, well, what we're talking TV is pretend like there's different viewers on each show. So I guess that's what we're going to do right now. My name is Chris Michaels. I am a weekend morning meteorologist. My phone keeps buzzing. That usually doesn't happen when I'm on TV. But anyways, I'm a weekend morning meteorologist with WCYB in Bristol, Virginia. We cover Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, Southeast Kentucky, and a little bit of Northwestern North Carolina. So we got a little bit of it all. I went to NC State, got my degree in meteorology just this past May, and then 3 days later moved out here. Beautiful area. That's the way I wanted things to be, get a job straight out of school, so very fortunate with that. Our area is very tricky, especially when we have wedges, which is what we've had over the past few days. Although this time around it was a little bit easier to forecast for. So in Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, it's generally been low to mid-70s, lots of sunshine. I mean, I don't remember seeing skies this blue for a while. Really pleasant conditions. We started fall, as we all know, Monday night, and it's really felt like it. We've had overnight lows. This is something that's kind of out of normal. Our normal low, at least in the Tri-Cities, is 52, but we've had overnight lows in the upper 30s to mid 40s over the past few days, and that has felt, for me, amazing. It feels really nice to walk outside early in the morning or late at night and feel that crisp fall air. But we'll start warming things up here pretty soon into the upper 70s, low 80s. In fact, we hit a high of 79 today, so that's already starting things off. And our rain chances are really looking to be slim to none until next Monday and Tuesday. Not many major weather disturbances in our area, but that the low pressure system off the coast of Carolina and North Carolina has been giving my parents a fit in Raleigh. And I've also, I know I keep talking here, but Scotty, I don't know if you've seen the low pressure system in the Northeast Pacific. The satellite imagery on that thing is just, it's beautiful. And looking at it almost looked like a tropical disturbance, but man, that thing, it's beautiful, but it's bringing some pretty heavy rains to the Pacific Northwest. Obviously, none of us really cover that, but when you see interesting weather, you have to talk about it.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. It really does look impressive, looking at that thing. I mean, and it is producing a lot of rain up there. It's funny that you said you hit 79 today as your high temperature. Here it was 62, and I think we're maybe 80, 70, 80 miles from each other.
Yeah, we're not that far from each other.
Not at all. I can get to Bristol, Tennessee, in that area about an hour and a half. So,
Wow.
we're not really that far away, but I mean that's what 14, 15 degree temperature spread there, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So, and that's just because we are socked in with that wedge. It's been really cloudy, not really raining a lot. We've had on and off drizzle and light rain, but nothing overly major, and just been really cool. I was up in Mitchell County yesterday, and at 3 p.m. up there it was 52 degrees. That's
Oh.
something that you're like, man, this feels like it's December or January up here. So, but yeah, it's been really a cool week, just cool and cloudy. We had a great weekend weather-wise with partly cloudy skies, temperatures in the low 80s, and then you get hit with reality when you wake up Monday morning. So it's been it's been very I don't know, just back to reality. But like you said, it looks like we are going to hopefully get this stubborn cold front to actually just push on out of here so we can warm up. I know even Eastern Carolina over towards what you said in Raleigh and stuff, it's been cool and rainy over there as well. So hopefully we can get that system knocked out and warm back up. And it kind of looked like next week we may be in store for a little bit more warmer temperatures, but also some rumblings of maybe some tropics getting active as well next week. So that'll be interesting to watch as well.
Yeah, it's always interesting to watch, and we watched since June at these models in the long range. They'll always pump out something, but you wonder if now there may actually be some kind of truth to it. I haven't looked too much at that, but one thing that also caught my attention, I was sitting with one of our other weekend meteorologists, David Boyd, and we were looking at, I believe it was the GFS, but of course when you're looking so long range, you can't fully trust it, but it looked like there was a little bit of a cold snap that would eventually head this way, maybe later next week or into the following weekend. But yeah, no, when you were talking about you guys being 62, it just reminded me. Yesterday, I posted a picture, and this has just been characteristic of this summer. And I'm sure when Brad gets on here, he'll talk about the wedge events and just how unusual it's been to have as many as we've had. Uh, but kicking off autumn, we obviously have this wedge pattern, and I took a picture from Kingsport, Tennessee, which is west of the Appalachians. Blue, sunshine in the 70s. And then I took a picture from our Boone Sky Cam, and obviously that's east of the Appalachian Mountains. So it was cloudy, dreary, and then I took our local temperatures map and I put that in between the two pictures, and you can see it was 53 in Boone, and it was, I believe, 71 or 72 in the Tri-Cities, and this was yesterday afternoon. Just we get these wedges, but it never ceases to amaze me just how the barrier between, say, Boone and Kingsport, how much of an effect that has, and all it has to do with is just straight dynamics. And on our side, the air, when you get a good easterly wind, it's going to warm and compress, and so that's why we're dry and in the 70s. But no matter how many times it happens, it's always so impressive. And I've got to tip my hat off to a synoptics professor of mine, Gary Lackman, who teaches at NC State, and he showed us an experiment of what you would do, of what the mean sea level pressure contours would look like without the mountains there, and it's unbelievable. I can't remember exactly what it looked like and exactly the dynamics of it, but the Appalachian Mountains, man, they throw a curveball into things sometimes. Uh, Also wanted to mention that Nate Johnson from WRAL had put out a tweet yesterday saying that I believe the high in Raleigh was 64, and that had been the first time since about April that it was that cool in Raleigh. So it's just it seems to be everywhere east of the Appalachians that things have been quite cool and dreary over the past few days.
It has, and Chris, you're talking about the wedge effect. Where it warms up on your side of the mountain, but it's the exact opposite when we get the northwest flow. You guys and Boone gets all the snow, and then the air compresses at it as it comes off the mountains, and we get nothing but partly cloudy skies and temps in the 40s and 50s. So it's
Yeah.
very crazy to see how the Appalachian Mountains just create so much weather around our areas that it makes it hard to believe sometimes.
Yeah, I've already had some trouble with the northwest flow here, even in the summer months. So I don't like to talk about it.
Yeah, it's never fun. It's never fun. I've seen that Brad Panovich has joined on with us, and Brad's one of our longtime panelists and comes on from time to time, and he is coming in from Charlotte. And Brad, uh, Ricky, and Joey are running behind, so Chris and I are doing some field time right now on the show. So I'm glad I have another TV guy that can just help us talk until we get
Yeah.
everybody in here.
Yeah, it's easy to fill time. That's all we do. We get paid to fill time.
Oh man! So Brad, how you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing good. Been a busy week, but so far, it's starting to slow down a little towards the end here, which is always good.
Well, that's good. Everyone, if you're new to our show tonight, this is Brad Panovich. He is the chief meteorologist at NBC Charlotte. We by far say the best station in Charlotte. But Brad, I'll kind of let you introduce yourself and
Okay.
kind of go over your background and all that kind of stuff, and then we'll go ahead and start the show, and we'll let Ricky and everybody else join in when they get here.
Yeah, we'll save the good questions for when they get in.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, Scotty kind of took my, did a good introduction there. I'm the chief meteorologist at NBC Charlotte. I've been in Charlotte now almost 12 years. I was just talking about this the other day. I think December it's going to be my 12th year anniversary of coming to Charlotte, which you guys were talking about the wedge. My first event in Charlotte was the 2002 December ice storm, which I remember fondly. Surpassed Hugo for power outages and tree falls in the Charlotte area. So we had the Hugo anniversary last week, and now, or earlier this week, and now we're talking about that ice storm. So that's a fond memory for me. But before that, I was at WWL in New Orleans, the CBS affiliate down there for 4 years. Spent 1 year in Traverse City, Michigan, as the chief meteorologist up at the Fox station there. And my first gig in TV was in Dayton, Ohio, at the NBC station. So 4 jobs in my career. This will hopefully be my last.
Yes. Well, I know, Brad, you have a big following in the Charlotte area and throughout North Carolina. I mean, when you think of North Carolina weather, it's Brad Panovich, and then out in the Raleigh area with WRAL. I mean, you guys really represent us well, and you was actually on a national show this past weekend. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, last Sunday I was on Weather Geeks, which is the kind of the new talk show. I guess it's been on now for a couple of months. The talk show that that Marshall Shepard, Dr. Marshall Shepard, who was former president of the AMS and professor at the University of Georgia, hosts at the Weather Channel. We actually taped it 2 weeks earlier. He's so good now; they're doing 2 weeks at a time to get ahead of schedule. And the topic was really interesting. I wish we had more time. I know that's a lot of complaints about that show. And after being on it, I can tell you, even as a TV guy, it seemed like it went incredibly fast. And I'm used to short time spans. But the topic was social science and severe weather warnings, how the public perceives the warning process. And you could take this topic in a million different directions. We talked a little bit about how broadcasters have to communicate warnings better, how the Weather Service does, how certain colors mean certain things. And we talked a little bit about the social media aspect of this and how sometimes the cry wolf syndrome has helped or hurt, depending on how you look at it, people's awareness for severe weather. So it was a really good topic. I wish we had more time to address it, but was really honored to be on that show. I was actually going to go down to Atlanta and shoot it there, but my station wanted me to stay at home, so we did it via satellite. And luckily, being an NBC affiliate, we're our affiliate ship with NBC, and NBC owns the Weather Channel. It was pretty easy to set up, but it was a really interesting topic, and something in the last, I would say, 4, 5, maybe 6 years that I've really kind of gotten into is the social science aspect of my job. And there's a line I said on Sunday, and I'll say it again tonight. I feel like as a meteorologist in the weather enterprise, our ability to warn people, it has really gotten to the level where it's very good, but our ability to communicate those warnings is still really poor. We have great forecasts, but a lot of times those great forecasts aren't finishing out with people doing what we want them to do as far as preparing for severe weather. And it's a constant frustration. There's a lot of things well, I can look at myself in the mirror and say I'm partly to blame because there's things that we could do better, but there's also a lot of things that the public could help do. And so I'm always trying to figure out ways to communicate information, especially severe weather information, in an easier to understand way, in a format that people can understand, and also when there's severe weather, understand what the threat level is. So it's a difficult thing to weigh, but I'm learning all the time. And in meteorology, this is just another thing that's really changing a lot in our field.
And Brad, actually, we've talked off air. I think we're actually going to do that social science show on the 15th of October. So I know we're excited to have you come on, and you can have all the time you want on this show. We're not going to restrict you on that. So we're really looking forward to that. And I see that Daniel has joined us, so we're glad to have Daniel on tonight. So we're kind of going to go ahead and get into our show. I just got a message from Rich. It looks like Comcast is down in his area right now, so I think that is why he has not been able to get on. And I think Ricky just sent us a Facebook message. He's on his way as well. So we'll go ahead and get the show started. And tonight's topic is a summer in review, and it's kind of been a tale of 2 years. June was really summer-like, and then in the past 2 months, it kind of took a downward turn, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight with our guest, is just how the summer season has been a tale of two things. And so I'll open it up to you guys. Maybe Chris, I know you've been doing some research. We'll kind of go from your area then into the Piedmont, kind of talk about what summer's been like throughout the viewing area.
All right, yeah. You and I had talked on Facebook a little bit, and I'm a numbers guy, and sometimes that helps, and sometimes that really hurts. Because when you look at, in my area, from June through September 22nd, the summer temperatures were just, they were average. You had your average maximum temperature at 84, and from 1938 to 2014, that's pretty much what you would expect. But, you know, anybody around here is going to say our summer was not average. And that's why recently I'm trying to stay away from that term normal or average, because there's just no such thing. We all know that meteorology is not an exact science, and we all know that there's no such thing as normal when it comes to weather anywhere. So I tried to break it down a little bit in our area, and Scotty, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Because in June, it wound up being in a 76-year scale, it was our 10th warmest June on record in the Tri-Cities. Then you go into July, and it was our 9th coolest July on record. And then August and September were kind of in the middle, with September being a little bit on the warmer side. So when you take all that, the helter-skelter from warm to cold averages, and you put them all together, it's going to look like average. But we had, let's see, I did the numbers, and we had 16 days that were above 90 degrees, which is about the normal for here. But we also reached quite a few record lows, and we also had our first tornado. I'm going to call it an outbreak, because it was July 27th was when we had 3 tornadoes go through the viewing area. And prior to that, we hadn't seen a tornado in this viewing area since March of 2012. So that is pretty out of the ordinary. So you look at the numbers from June through September, and everything says this was just an average summer, but it really was not. You had the ups and downs. You had a tornado outbreak. You had a drought to begin with, and then you had surplus in rain towards the end. And just really, I recognize that there were some folks around the country who were saying, here's how our summer wrapped up. And for a lot of areas, that just doesn't tell the true story. You've got to break it down. And even what I did by a month-by-month basis, that may not be enough. I may have to do a little bit more digging to see just the extremes of this summer, or if it was just flat out normal. But yeah, bottom line is that you just can't count on those words, average or normal. That's just cut and dry what I found over the past hour and a half. And being a new guy to the field, always trying to learn things. So I thought it was pretty interesting to see all that.
It is, and that was one thing I was hoping that we could talk about, maybe as we get into the show. Is we don't normally think July in our area as having like a tornado outbreak. We'll use that loosely. I mean, it wasn't like we had 20, 30 some tornadoes, but for your
Right.
area, having three tornadoes that seem to be fairly strong, EF1, EF2 for the mountains of Tennessee and North Carolina, that's pretty intense. So I hope that we get back into that and talk about that because that was a huge story
Hmm.
this summer, especially for your area and even our area where I'm at and Brad's at, as we watch that line of severe weather move into the area. So, Brad, I'll toss it to you and kind of, if you want to talk about the Piedmont and upstate of South Carolina, how the summer overall has been, and then we can kind of dig into the different parts of it as we go through the show.
Yeah, I'm kind of like a Chris on this. I like the numbers because I'm one of those people. I feel like people always perceive the weather a lot different than it actually is. So I always like to go back and look at the numbers to see if the reality meets the perception. And let's see if I could share the screen. And I actually started doing this morning, looking up some of this data. And the first map you see, this is the departure from average for June. And as Chris mentioned, June was hot. I mean, I think people forget about how warm June actually was. 2 degrees above average in the Piedmont, if you look at the climate divisions there. And almost all of, really all of North and South Carolina were well above average, and most of the Southeast, which was kind of interesting. And if I go back to July, this is what happened in July.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, July got really cold, especially the farther west you went. Some areas around the Arklatex and the Middle Mississippi River Valley had one of the coldest Julys on record. And then you go to August, so I think people were kind of stunned. Okay, July, typically you think the hottest time of year, and it typically is on average, and it was pretty cool. And then you look at August, exactly normal, or average, as Chris and I like to say. We don't like normal, but average in the Piedmont. I mean, there was no departure. So you had this really warm July, or June, excuse me, this really cold July, and then a really kind of normal August, which I think kind of threw people off for what was actually going on. And then if you look at the kind of the summer in totality for the Southeast, I looked up. I think this was the average here. Let me see if I can find it. For the whole summer, I thought it was kind of interesting to look at the whole summer here. Okay, let me see if I can back this up and show you. For the this is for the whole country. I'll back this up one. So this is January through August for the entire country, and you can see in the Piedmont of the Carolinas, it's just been slightly below average, and a lot of that was due to just how cold the winter was. But you can see the pattern. If you look at this, you kind of see the ridge out west, the prominent trough centered right over the Mississippi River Valley. And one other thing that I thought was really, really interesting was rainfall, precipitation anomalies from January 1st to August. And I'm going to kind of fly through these really quick, so pardon with me. These are the precipitation anomalies. And look how unbelievably dry it's been in the Appalachians. That is really dry. And I think what happened here is we didn't have a lot of northwest flow snow in the winter. And then in the summer, we had so much northwest flow and northeast flow, we didn't get our typical southeast flow off the Atlantic and the Gulf, which typically drives the afternoon convection. And so the combination of those two patterns is really to keep most of these areas out of drought. But it's kind of telling that not only were we cool, but we were kind of dry as well. And typically in the Carolinas, when we have a cool summer, it's usually because we get a ton of rain, like last year. Last year's summer was pretty mild, and that really was the main reason we had such a cool summer last year. This year, almost the complete opposite, was cool and dry. So we had completely sunny days where the temperature was below average, which is almost unheard of around here. And so I did a quick Charlotte kind of round up here. I did this. I think I did this at the end of August. But if you want to look at like certain temperatures, days above, below 90, days high temperatures below 80. The left little cluster there are all the high temperatures in Charlotte that were below 80 degrees. And this year we only had 6 days. On average, we'd have 9.5. So it really wasn't that cool. And then you look at days at 90. We didn't get a lot of 90s this year, but we didn't have, I would say, record-breaking low number. We had 46. So it really wasn't that of an extreme summer. And if you love data, I always love these little scatter plots. I did one of these, and this is the whole summer average temperature June to August for Charlotte, and all these balls represent years and where they fall on the scale. So the highest ball up there is the hottest summer on record, and the lowest ball is the coldest one on record, and the red one is where we were this year, which is kind of, it's towards the lower end, but it's kind of in the middle. So all those numbers, all that jargon together, we basically had an average summer. But in some ways it wasn't average from a weather pattern standpoint, because as you know, I have never seen these many cold fronts and cold air damming events in the summertime here. It's just almost unheard of to see one front in July or one front in August or a couple fronts in June. I think I counted, there must have been like 15 cold front passages between June and August. That's just unbelievable. And now we're into September, and these cold air damming events, we've had more this September and this summer than I think we had all of last year combined. It's just been unbelievable. So it makes me really start to think about my winter forecast as we go towards the winter, because we are so overdue for an ice storm in the Piedmont of the Carolinas. And if this wedgie, I don't know what I call it, persistent wedgie blocking pattern kind of thing sets up, boy, man, this winter could be just miserable for ice and sleet events. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And like Chris, severe weather-wise, I think it was kind of a quiet year severe weather-wise, but last year was really quiet as well. We had our first tornado warning in my viewing area since 2012. We didn't have one single warning, not tornado, just a warning in our viewing area all of 2013. That has never happened since I've been here. And our first warning this year was in the winter time. It was actually February or January, I believe. And then we had a couple severe weather outbreaks this summer that were decent, but I'll be honest, I'm going to knock on wood. Since 2011, we have had just incredibly quiet severe weather in the southeast. Sans maybe one or two derecho events that kind of skirted the area.
Yeah, Brad, and that's something that Chris and I was talking about before you was able to join us, is just how impressive the wedge has been this summer. I mean, today it was like 62, 63 degrees, and I know it was like that in Charlotte as well. Whereas just 70 miles from here, where Chris is at in Bristol and Johnson City, it was 79 degrees today. And it's just crazy how that wedge pattern has really set up this summer, and it really does make you think, well, what does this winter look like?
Yeah, you guys probably hate me right now with all the sunshine and 70 degrees. So I'll try not to talk too much about it.
I haven't seen the sun forever. It's been frustrating from a forecasting standpoint because you kind of see the wedge coming, but these events have been like to the extreme. Like the models sometimes can give you hints of wedge events. They don't ever forecast it correctly, but they give you a hint. There was just no hint at all of the depth and intensity of these two cold air events, the cold air damming events. And then kind of another thing that snuck up last Friday night was that flash flooding we had in the Piedmont. We had a little inverted trough that swung in from the coast and just parked over the Charlotte area. And Friday night, I think I had a 10% pop, and we go to like 7 flash flood warnings as these storms just formed in Southeastern County, got like 7 inches. It was just really weird setup. We've had this kind of almost semi-permanent stalled frontal boundary on the coast, and if you looked at any of the models for next week, I mean, we've got another low coming up out of the Gulf and coming up the East Coast. It's just a crazy pattern, and what little hair I have left, I'm going to be yanking out every little bit here in the next week or so, figuring this thing out.
Hey, Brad.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest. I just looking at that precip anomaly that you showed,
Yeah.
especially for me up here in McDowell County, I'm stunned
Yeah.
because every time the wind shifts to the east this summer, we've had some heavy rain set up along the eastern slopes, and Scotty knows that. We've had some long nights doing coverage. So
I think the thing that's been about the rainfall, I think there's been extreme events, like, and even in the Charlotte area, we've gone weeks without a drop, and then we get 7 inches of rain in one day. I think that's the kind of the pattern we've had. We've had a lot of flash flooding events, but it's been separated by long spells of just no precipitation. I think a lot of that dryness was built up from the winter time because we just did not get a lot of precipitation over the winter. I tell people all the time, and they think it's crazy. I said, low precipitation in the winter is actually can be snowfall because you don't understand that, just an inch of liquid is 10 inches of snow. You could get a ton of snow and not really equal that much liquid precip. So there's always a chance you can have an above average snowfall year and have below average precip. You just don't get the cold rain events that you typically get in the wintertime around here.
I do agree that it's kind of been a all or nothing type situation because we've gone 2.5 weeks at a time, and then we'll have a night where we might get 3 or 4 inches of rain in like 6 hours or 12 hours. So, yeah, that really surprised me when I saw that total. But the northwest flow aloft, like you said, that in the summertime that cuts it out for the mountains.
Yep.
You gotta have south or southeast or southwest.
Yeah, those areas. I mean, we've got there's almost tropical rainforest there in like Transylvania County and parts of Polk County and McDowell County because for 4, 5, 6 months out of the year they get southeast flow off the Atlantic, and every single day you get a storm that anchors right there, and you end up with 70, 80 inches of annual rainfall. We just haven't had that much this year. There's been big bouts of northwest flow, which has been all downsloping and drying everything out.
And Brad, to kind of piggyback with what you're talking about, I kind of did it on a local level of just Burke County where we live at. And what you're saying, temperatures in June was a little bit above normal. July was below normal by a couple of degrees, and then August it kind of averaged out. Rain-wise, though, it was very spotty in what part of the county got more rain than the other. But to kind of go off of what you're talking about, those long periods of time, June the 10th, obviously, we had that big microburst over downtown Morganton at 10:30 at night. I mean, it annihilated every tree standing in like a 3-block frame. I mean, there's hardly any trees left. And not only was that the case, a couple of days after, we had another microburst in almost the same location. But then from June 19th to July the 27th, which was the severe outbreak that affected Chris, we went without any severe weather whatsoever. And that was a good month, and that hardly ever happens. I mean, I don't even recall many thunderstorms during that time frame. So it was very crazy to see how it come in waves. You would go a couple of weeks without anything really major happening. And then to kind of close up summer, we had that flash flooding that you were alluded to a couple of weeks ago. So it has been. I guess I would like to get both of you guys to comment on this. It's been a high bust or forecast really for throughout this summer.
Yeah, think about some of the severe weather outbreaks we were supposed to have, and they kind of just fell apart because we got wedged in, or we just, we didn't get the ingredients to come together. It's definitely, in some ways, when you look at the numbers, it's been an average summer, an average year. But then you look at the events, it's been anything but average from a forecasting standpoint.
Yeah, and excuse me. Oh, there's something in my throat there. Anyways, you guys were talking about the northwest flow and everything. For me, that's a pain in my what. For you guys, you love it because it's warming and drying over the leeward side of the mountains. But I think, Brad, you were talking about the amount of cold fronts that have come through, but every time that I was expecting a severe weather event, there just wasn't that lifting source. And we had those fronts that would come through, but they would just be weak.
Yeah.
They were really weak, and you would expect that in summertime, but the amount that actually came through was not expected.
Yeah.
It's that that upper level lifting source just was not there, and we would have the warm air, we would have the moist air, and you wouldn't have much of a cap, but or if you did have a cap, there was just no lifting to it. So
Yeah.
every time that we were going with maybe a higher pops or talking about potential strong storms in the afternoon, it just seemed like it wouldn't happen because your lifting source was up north. Now July 27th was a different case. We actually did have some troughiness and some board advection, so we wound up getting the lift necessary, the shear necessary for widespread supercells. So that's what created our outbreak, and we call it an outbreak because we were wall to wall for 3 hours, which for us is that's a long time. I know there's a lot of horror stories of being wall to wall for longer than 6 hours or 10 hours, but we definitely didn't have that. But just getting back to what I was saying, the lifting source just was not there, even with as many fronts as we did have come through the area.
And that's something I would like to kind of get you guys to comment on it. I know Ricky's here, so Ricky comes in at a good time. Chris, I'd like for you to maybe talk a little bit about that July 27th day. And then Brad and Ricky, maybe we could discuss a little bit, though it didn't really do a lot of damage, but Hurricane Arthur hitting on the coast of North Carolina during the July 4th. That, I believe, I may be wrong with this, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was the earliest fallen hurricane in North Carolina, July the 4th. So, that another, again, an extreme of summertime. We normally see hurricanes from late August through September, like right now. But maybe we can get you guys to discuss the tornadoes up in your area, Chris, and then maybe we can discuss Hurricane Arthur down along the coast.
All right. Which one do you want to start with?
Whichever you guys want to. Let's go chronological order. We'll do Arthur first, since Ricky just joined us and he can kind of introduce himself as well. But we'll talk about Arthur and then we'll go to the severe weather outbreak in your area, Chris.
All right, sounds good to me.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Scotty, it was a pretty early storm. Arthur making landfall kind of the night of July 3rd, July 4th. Brad, I mean, we talked about it in one of our previous episodes. It really was pretty uncommon. I think the first one ever on record on July 4th.
Yeah, I do believe that was the earliest landfalling Category 2, which I don't really believe it was a Cat 2, but in North Carolina history, I believe, and in that area, I don't think there'd ever been one in that time frame. So from a timeline standpoint, that's a really rare time to get a storm of that strength. And if you just look at it from a number standpoint, it was abnormal to get it like that. But as you know, Ricky, there really, for being this big storm, there was almost no damage out there. You would expect there to be, I don't even think a federal disaster area was declared in any county in North Carolina. And if you told me that with a Category 2, I probably would say you're full of it,
But, I mean, the saving grace really was it was so fast moving, and the main impacts were from one tidal surge that came in, I think, down in towards Manio and Nags Head early in the morning of July 4th. That was the worst damage person that I heard of, when some of the sound side water got into a few homes down there. But really, I mean, you could have almost slept through the night of July 3rd and woke up July 4th and wouldn't even know a hurricane came through.
It was kind of funny. Because we had all these crews out there, and you're right. People went to bed. It was sunny on our live shots the night before, and the next morning, it was sunny again. In the middle of the night, this storm came through. So it was one of those weird. It was tough to cover. It was a holiday weekend too, which was horrible because you had all these crews covering almost a non-event, but you had to be out there. And really, the worst impact ended up being all those people that had to cancel their holiday plans. And all the lost tourism money. That probably was the biggest loss financially, was that, more so than the damage that was done.
Mm-hmm. And I want to tie in one other thing quickly, Scotty, and then I'll give it to Chris. But something I just thought of today that kind of has a summer influence is we had a lot of rain this summer, it seems like, across eastern North Carolina, especially over the past 2 weeks. So I guess you still consider that technically being summer over the past 2 weeks, but it makes me wonder about if we get a late season tropical cyclone through there, what the damage would be. Would it actually be worse than that stronger Category 2 we saw earlier in the year? We saw the same thing with Isabel, September 18, 2003, along eastern North Carolina. There were hundreds and thousands of trees that got knocked down because we had such a rainy summer. It makes me wonder about that, and any implications later down into fall.
Yeah, I shared this map earlier, Ricky, and this was the precipitation anomaly since the beginning of the year. And as dry as it's been in the western part of the state, the eastern part of the state actually has an above-average rainfall anomaly. And again, a lot of that's been this summer. So you look at the 3 climate zones in the eastern part of the state, they're all above average, and then the 2, really 5 climate zones in the western part of the state are all below average. So the state has really been divided from a rainfall standpoint this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've mentioned this before, but with Arthur being so fast moving, and I wasn't in North Carolina for these storms, but do you think that there was some level of fear or worry about it just after having storms like Floyd move through that just essentially sat right over the state, that there was some kind of fear involved in people going out to the coast on a holiday weekend? I mean, thank goodness it didn't turn into a Floyd or anything like that, but with past storms like that affecting the state, you've got to think that longtime North Carolinians are going to be quick to cancel their plans, even though Arthur was fast moving.
Chris, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I think actually it's the people not from North Carolina who ended up canceling their plans. Because here in North Carolina, at least on the coastal portions, people who have been through the storms before saw, oh, it's going to brush the coast. Who cares? That's sadly the mentality a lot of people have out there, except for maybe a few of the more smarter, in-depth meteorology people. So I think the biggest revenue is probably lost from some of these out-of-town people who just come in for the weekend. Usually they rent a house out for about 3 or 4 days, maybe a week. They probably lost the most out of anybody.
Yeah.
It's probably it's the New Yorkers like me who laugh at you when there's snowstorms, but then when there's a hurricane coming, we go running towards the western side of the state. So yeah, I can totally see what you're talking about there.
Hey, with Ricky, I'd agree with that too, and I'll tell you another thing. The timing was really bad. It come on a Thursday, and a lot of your vacationers are like Saturday to Saturday. So when you had the storm come through on a Thursday, it either shortened your vacation, or if you were someone that were coming in following a storm, you were thinking, well, this thing's going to be messed up, and so you decided to cancel your vacation when, like Brad said, overnight it happened, and then the next morning it was gone.
Yeah.
I actually had a friend of mine who was on his honeymoon, and now that I think about it, he's from Jersey and his wife is from Pittsburgh. So I completely take back what I said about longtime North Carolinians, and I'm going to blame it on the Yankees.
Yeah, I remember Arthur so well because I was telling people, week out, people were already freaking out, like, should I cancel my plans? And I was pretty out there saying, hey, don't change your plans. Unless you're going to the Outer Banks, there's really no reason to change your plan. I had people calling me that were going to Hilton Head, Myrtle Beach, and Charleston, and that area. Like, should we cancel? I'm like, no. And even the people going to the Outer Banks, they just got a hotel inland for one night. As they got kicked off the island, they could have gone back out the next day and been fine. They didn't even lose power. I mean,
no, didn't.
Just amazing.
There was one guy in Kitty Hawk who I ran into the morning of July 4th, and he was mentioning he didn't really even see any impacts, and I didn't see any. I got to remember there's not a lot of trees and other stuff along with the Kitty Hawk area or anything that's really too susceptible to being knocked down by a strong wind, except for maybe some power lines, and most of those are pretty strong throughout that region, having weathered a few storms. But there really was nothing that I could find. The biggest thing I found was a few rocks that got pushed onto the road near the bridge down there.
Wow.
And so we'll kind of take that into, that was the first part of July, and then the last part of July, Chris, kind of maybe you want to talk about maybe the setup of July 27th. I know we've had this conversation a little bit. I don't know if it was on air or not, but you kind of knew this was coming, and I think you were there almost, 24 hours, something like that. I mean, you was there long time watching that system come in and kind of talk about the effects July 27th had up in your area.
Yeah, it was a close to 24-hour shift, but my boss kept coming up, my news director kept coming up to me. He's like, "You want? There's a couch upstairs. You can sleep." I'm like, "I am not sleeping through this, man. I'll work another 20 hours if you want me to." But it was one of those things that we saw it coming. We saw the trough. We were looking at soundings that looked pretty favorable. But when I woke up that morning and I started looking at some of the mesoscale models, the photographs, and saw a little bit of curvature in the lowest 1 kilometer, and that's when I started to not obviously not panic, but start to think, okay, this could actually turn into something. You see the deep layer shear was starting to get impressive, well over 20 meters per second over the deep layer. You had your warmth, you had your instability, and you also had that curvature and that lift. So looking at that morning, I started getting certain graphics together, the SPC outlook, and then I came up with one that I think really hit home with people who were watching that morning show, and it was one side that said what you do if you're prepared, and one side that said what you do when you're scared. And the scared one was talking about you're going to act frantically, you're going to make poor decisions, and the prepared one was that you were going to be informed, you were going to act rationally. I think that really hit home because the viewers in our area were, for the most part, responsible during that. So in the morning, started talking about be prepared, not scared. Uh, and then after I got off the air is when the SPC put the significant around us for tornado risk. And then after that, I started looking at the latest model that had come out, and the curvature in the lowest 1 kilometer had gotten a little more impressive. So then I started calling the meteorologist that we have, and then I called my news director, and we just made the decision right off the bat to have everybody come in, have our anchors, have our reporters, producers, our web manager, news director was there forever that day. So we just had all hands on deck because we just kind of knew that it wasn't going to be an April 27, 2011, but it was going to be a significant weather event just from looking at the forecasting ingredients. So like I said, was it an April 27th? Absolutely not. But was it significant enough to where it could cause some worry in people? Yeah. And that's when just looking at what Brad does with social science, having that prepared, not scared mentality, I think really helped. Also, I had read a study in the National Academic Press, which it actually mentioned you, Brad, about doing blog posts before events that you know are going to pose a threat. And I took that idea and ran with it. And so the day before, I had posted something, and then the meteorologist on staff would update that blog post. So it just really, really helped people being prepared, knowing the forecast ingredients. So, Brad, thank you for that idea. And I think that's what's so awesome about our business now is that we all understand, and we've talked about it before on a previous show, that it's not about ratings, it's not about this station versus this station, it's about everybody with a common goal coming together and trying to help people stay informed when severe weather is looming. So, and at that point, that was the main goal, and everybody, for the most part, was safe and was responsible. So the 27th was a bit of a weird day because it was my first day going through severe weather coverage, but I would work a 20-hour shift more times than a normal person would, just to make sure that people were safe and that things were going smoothly like they did that day. So I know that was a little bit more than what you guys wanted, but that's July 27th in a wrap.
No, that's good stuff. And as it moved out of your area and then into our area, I know Daniel and I, we covered it as it entered the foothills. And Daniel, we had that I guess it was a tornado warning for Avery County, and then Brad may know that a little bit more than me. I can't remember if that was a severe warning or a tornado warning, but needless to say, it was looking a little hairy as it came into Avery County, and once it went through that area, it kind of just lost a little bit of steam. And to my knowledge, I know in our area, Daniel, we didn't really see much from that line of storms, and I know maybe Ricky and Brad can kind of elaborate as it went into the Piedmont, but that wasn't really much of an event for us, Daniel.
No, it really wasn't. And of course, I gotta give Ricky some kudos. We were streaming this for quite a while that night, but it was almost like the very lowest level that Chris was worried about in East Tennessee. It wasn't occurring here on the immediate eastern slopes. I mean, I remember looking at the radar aloft when we looked at that storm and it crossed into Avery County, and it was very impressive aloft. But it was that lowest level. I think it wasn't quite as favorable on this side of the mountain, and for the immediate foothills, it kind of died out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the first tornado warning in Avery County in a while.
Yeah, it's.
I was trying to think. I know I remember tweeting out. That might have been. I know for sure it was the first tornado warning in Avery County on record in the month of July, and it might have been the first warning in Avery County since I could look back. I think I looked back to 1998. And I could not find another tornado warning on the severe weather database. Obviously, there's probably was warnings before that, but it's just a rare spot to see a warning. And I remember that night. As you were mentioning, a lot of those storms had mid and upper level rotation in them, but nothing ever got down to the surface. That was a long night because I was worried about everything that happened over in eastern Tennessee and southwest Virginia and up in Kentucky. It had me nervous, and it came over the mountains and just it didn't do anything, even though the storms at times looked really impressive on the radar.
They really did. And of course, it's always a challenge for the local weather service office to try to pull the trigger on a tornado warning, but it was that impressive, and it was definitely worth doing. But thankfully, we didn't get any ground truth.
Yeah, I just looked, and GSP has only issued 10 tornado warnings this year so far, which is the fewest since 2005.
In comparison, though, Brad and everyone else, I don't know if you have it handy, but what was the number of severe thunderstorm warnings?
I wish I wouldn't have closed it out. I could have told you.
Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's pretty high, and the way I'm leading into this is, through the last couple of weeks, we've had a lot of pulse storms that have popped up.
Yeah.
It seems like we had a big pattern change, with the Bermuda High and everything else, and a little bit more of in between the fronts coming through, some actual lifting for once.
I think one of our biggest warning days was a bunch of pulse storms.
Yeah, it was.
We were never in a watch. I don't think SPC even had us outlooked. It was one of those. All right, so severe thunderstorm warnings this year, 308 by GSP, which is actually last year was 340. So they're on pace to go ahead of last year. And but when you look back at 2012, they had 579. 2011, 692 severe thunderstorm warnings, which is the most I'm looking at since 2000. Let's see, since 1986. I mean, that shows you a lot about 2011.
Yeah.
That was. I will never forget that April for a long time.
I think out of all the offices in the country this year, and I can't remember exactly what, I know it's in the top 10 for warnings this year, GSP is. I believe, I think I tweeted that out at some point.
Yeah, for severe, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for severe thunderstorm warnings, that's right, yeah. Sorry, I should have been more clear about that. But yeah, because even us, we're obviously close, so we watch GSP for some of our North Carolina counties, and it's amazing how some of those warnings are just popping up left and right on some of those days.
And I hope I'm not getting ready to throw a curveball to you guys, but I feel like we've talked about it, and I kind of want to get the science behind it if possible. The July 27th outbreak, obviously, we've seen a lot of cold our strong cold fronts move into the area, something that we really don't see around here in the summertime. Simply, what caused that? Why did that happen? Can you guys, maybe Brad, Chris, Ricky, whoever, kind of give us some idea of why was that so prevalent this year? I mean, what made that happen?
I think you got to look at the ridge over the Pacific, and I'm struggling with the timing of when exactly that was, but it just seemed like for a long time there, you had a persistent ridge over the Pacific, which would imply some troughiness over the Midwest or over our area, and then like I said before, did we necessarily have a lot of upper level lifting mechanisms? No, but we did have those frontal boundaries coming through. I have to believe that part of that's got to be due to the ridge over the Pacific.
Yeah, I would agree that the interesting thing about the trough, and I think when I showed the temperature anomalies for the year, I showed how the coldest anomalies were over the Mississippi River Valley. And I think that was kind of the location, the center of the trough that has been pretty persistent this year. And the reason I think we had a lot of dry and kind of not very prolific severe weather cold fronts, though we've had a couple, is that the upper air support was centered to the west or just to the north. We didn't get the heart of the trough in here to get all the way to the Carolinas. So I think for Chris, he was closer to that, so he got a little bit more of the dynamics, which helped him out on the 27th. And as those fronts got down here, they were purely surface based. There wasn't any mid and even upper level support for them. So while we got the cool air, because cool air's near the ground, it's going to be shallow, we didn't have the upper support with those cold fronts. So as strong as they seemed from a temperature gradient or baroclinic standpoint, they just didn't have that mid and upper level support. And I really think it's because that trough was kind of just centered to our west and northwest a little bit, as Chris mentioned, more the Midwest and the Mississippi River Valley.
And a lot of times, Brad, it seemed like it was timing as well coming through. I remember 2 or 3 fronts, they just happened to pass through in the early morning hours or afternoon, and we'd have a big blow up of storms in eastern Carolina or eastern Hampton Roads in my area over the summer.
Yeah, Ricky, I'm glad you brought that up, because I remember talking with my chief sometimes, and we would be talking about potential for storms, and I said the only way you're going to get a storm here is if you've got a low-level jet, and if you don't have that, it just doesn't look like you're going to get much, because overnight you're stabilizing your layer pretty much, and especially for us, we get the inversion layer up here, so a night that you might think you'd have some storms, if you don't have a low-level jet, you're just left with some fog, and that's about it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's been an interesting summer. Kind of go off of that. What do you think our fall period is going to look like as we have now? I mean, meteorologically, we already have been in fall, but as the calendar turns to autumn now, I'm not asking for winter, because I know everybody likes to do. I know Brad does his winter update, and Chris White with Berk Weather, he's going to do his winter update. His first one next week. So not asking for winter-wise, but what do you see as fall rolls around? I mean, do you think we continue with a normal, as I put that in air quotes, or what does the outlook look like for the next couple months?
100% chance of pumpkin spice everything.
Yeah.
There you go.
I debated, Scotty, of doing a fall outlook just to kind of get people off my back about the winter outlook. But really, I wanted to do it more for like a leaf outlook more than anything,
I'll tell you this: we had the local newspaper. They've already called me twice, and once today, really wanting to know what the winter's going to be like. I was like, listen, there's not enough data out there yet for us not even confidently say.
All right, yeah. Let me climb up my soapbox here. You're exactly right, Scotty. And I do not. I will admit I've just been dabbling in outlooks for winter since. I mean, it's been 9 years. It seems like, but it really is not a true science to me. It's hard to forecast seasonal forecasts, and having done it for 9 years, I honestly say there's probably 5 years that I would say I've verified remotely close to what I think is somewhat usable information. But as you mentioned, I think the hard part for winter is the winter pattern doesn't really set up till October, November. And you got, to me, you got to get through hurricane season kind of first to really get a good feel. Like, how's the hurricane season going? Because it tell you a lot about worldwide global teleconnection. So for me, the winter forecast is one of those things that's best served around pumpkin spice time when we get into the Halloween time frame. But just, what I've been looking at, I really think this autumn is going to be kind of mild and dry. Unless the tropics have a late push, I just don't see this being a really cold or really wet autumn. And it's kind of been off to that way here in September. We've got our first blast of cool air, but you start looking, unless we get a bunch of cold air damming events, which is always the equalizer, I just think we're going to have more ridging on the East Coast this autumn, which means nothing for the upcoming winter. But if I had to say, I'd say warm and dry more so for this winter, or for this, this autumn.
Yeah, you better not say warm and dry this winter. You might have people knocking down your door at the station.
I know. Yeah,
with the pitchforks and everything. But,
yeah.
Chris, what does it look like maybe for your area? I mean, and I agree with Brad. Chris and I have talked. It does kind of look like it's a warm and dry fall. I mean, what is that part, your part of Tennessee, looking like?
Yeah, I mean, we're already off to that start, and given the fact that if we do have more wedge events, then for us it's going to be mainly warm and dry. So I think a lot of this is just dependent on your tropical season and what happens in the next month and a half, 2 months or so. And not to talk too much about winter, but just something that's been a thought in my mind, and Brad mentioned global teleconnections. And Scotty, I mentioned to you before, my old synoptics professor, Gary Lackman at NC State, would always mention that, we haven't had a very active tropic season, at least in the Atlantic. The Eastern Pacific is a different story, but in the Atlantic, haven't really had a very active tropical season. The atmosphere will transport heat towards the poles through those kinds of systems. Being that we haven't had many of them, do we all of a sudden start to make up for that with mid-latitude systems in the winter? And that's just thought processing right now. I mean, like you guys, I don't think we have nearly enough intelligence to go making these accurate outlooks. But as far as autumn, the real question, depends on the tropics, depends on these damming events, but overall we're starting off, as we should be, mild and dry, and hoping that kind of sets the stage, because I love fall. I love it. Time for football and pumpkin cookies and leaf changing. That's what it's all about.
That's it. And I guess one thing, and I know we're closing in on an hour, so we'll kind of start closing up the program. But one thing I don't know if a lot of the public, I mean, I know we do, because we're all weather geeks and nerds and all that good stuff, but a lot of people don't realize that we see a peak in severe weather season in fall. And, I think that may be overlooked in the general public, as they think of fall, they think, it's starting to cool off or starting to frost and stuff like that. But that can really become a real issue, especially in the Western Carolinas and in the Charlotte area and even out to East Carolina.
Yeah, I'm calling this from memory, but I'm pretty sure that North Carolina leads the country in nighttime tornado deaths in November, if I'm not mistaken. It's one of those weird anomalies about North Carolina, where we tend to get a lot of November severe weather, and they tend to be nighttime, and it's all low-level jet-driven stuff. The Sherbs kind of stuff that that Ricky knows quite a bit about, the high shear low cape events that, boy, and they can go gangbusters even into the overnight period. So I do think that's a good point, Scotty. I think you could get, especially as you transition from a mild and dry fall, if we get that to what I think could be a wet winter. I'll just say that much. I don't think temperature-wise I'm ready, but I do think we could have a wet winter, depending on how how the tropical season plays out, and also how whatever the heck happens with El Nino or how the Pacific starts playing, because it's been a mess out there. It's trying to figure out what's going on out there. So I agree. I think November could be a really interesting month for severe weather.
That's a question we've all been asking for the last year about El Nino. That won't show up.
Yeah. That goes to show you how difficult and how much we don't really know about climate. That's something that's been studied much longer than a lot of these other teleconnections. And let's just face it, man. The Super El Nino was all the talk this spring. Ain't happening. And now it's struggling to even be a weak El Nino right now. I still think there'll be an El Nino, but it's going to be really weak, and it may be a slow starter the way things are looking out there right now.
But even like Brad, talking about long-range forecasts, and you've mentioned going into your winter weather forecasting, perhaps the accuracy of that sometimes in hurricane season forecasting. Going through the summer, it seems like we're actually on track for a average hurricane season, maybe below average, or whatever they forecast, I should say.
I think we've had 5 named storms, and while it started gangbusters with Arthur and we had all these early records, I think 5 storms on the 23rd, this was yesterday or today, is like the least amount since like 1997 or 92. So it's actually been, for all the early start, and if you look at ACE, if you're a fan of accumulated cyclone energy, I think we're only at like 45% of normal right now.
Yeah.
Every basin in the world is below average except for the Eastern Pacific, which is 150% of average. So, and when we've had, that tends to be the way it works. When you have an active Eastern Pacific, the Atlantic tends to shut down, and when the Atlantic's active, the Eastern Pacific is kind of like ho-hum. So one of the things that was last year in the Atlantic that really played a part was everyone talked about the dry air, the SAL layer, right? The Sahara air layer, as we call it. And even though we haven't seen as much of that this year, if you look at the instability in the Atlantic, it's been, again, at almost near record lows. The storm development just has not gotten going. And I don't know if it's because it's persistent warming and dry air in the mid-levels that's really squashed thunderstorm development, but we've seen the Hurricane Center, start giving probabilities for waves coming off the African coast, and then a day later, the thing is just gone. So it's just been a weird year in the Atlantic for the 2nd year in a row, and I think some of that same stuff's going on. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what that means for the winter. We had a weak, I would call we had a number of storms last year, but it was a really tame hurricane season last year as well.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but on September 10th, I believe it was the first time since 1995 where we didn't have some kind of tropical system in the Atlantic on September 10th, which is the peak of hurricane season, just to add to that.
Yeah, it's just been a unique year, and I guess for you guys who are watching, you can tell that we have no idea what's going to happen this year.
That's what it sounds like. Getting into it,
magic dartboard out over here. We'll figure out what's going.
There's so many variables to still come into play. So I know everybody's been asking, and heavens forbid, we've all seen the doomsday snowmageddon all the way down into the Florida Keys things posted. But honestly, anybody who right now can tell you this is what's going to happen is totally wrong, because there's so many things that have got to come into play that we don't even have any idea about yet until fall really gets into gear. So for those who are wanting to know the winter forecast, just hold tight.
Yeah, and the thing about seasonal forecasts, I think there is some skill, especially for good seasonal forecasters. The guys that do commodities trading are phenomenal long-range forecasters. But what you're trying to do is some of the stuff you see online, it's like you're not trying to forecast specific snowfall totals. All you're looking for is it going to be colder than average, warmer than average, wetter than average. And oftentimes when in the southeast, if you want a snowy winter, if you're a snow lover, which I know everyone is, the biggest thing you want is a wetter than average winter. I don't care about the cold, how cold it is, it doesn't matter. because if you get enough moisture here, the chances of timing out the moisture with some cold air is much better than having a bunch of cold air and just dry, 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 which, you know, you get Arctic outbreak after Arctic outbreak. Arctic air is dry. Unless you're in the mountains and you like northwest flow, those Arctic outbreaks don't do much east of the mountains.
No, not at all. And you know, it's just everybody wants snow, and like Brad said, you know, you want wetter than average. And here we're always going to flirt with it. And Brad and Daniel and Ricky, especially know, and Chris, I know you went to school at NC State. We're always on that 31 to 34 degree line. You know, part of Lake Norman and Mecklenburg County could get snow, and down where Brad Station is at, it may just be plain rain. So I mean, even when we get into winter, it's still going to be hard to forecast.
Yeah, think about how hard it is when the now casting one of these events, and now we're trying to tell people 2, 3, 4 months ahead of time about it. It's almost crazy.
Well, it's like the president. I saw someone on Twitter today. The president wants 4-week notice on quote extreme climate events. I'm like, we can't even sometimes get the 7-day right, guys.
Heck, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it's hard to get just the day of forecast right. So you know, it's crazy to know that. Well, we're heading in on 9:15, so we'll kind of wrap up here. Daniel, Ricky, I'll let you guys. I know you guys were late coming into the show, so if you have any questions or anything like that, I'll let you guys go ahead and shoot them to Brad and Chris's way, and if not, we can kind of start to wrap up.
I'm pretty good as far as that goes. I'm like you guys though, forecasting different seasonal stuff. You just have to look at what's going on, and I've had people ask me already, what's it going to do this winter? And I was like, give me about 3 or 4 more weeks, and I'll give you an answer.
About the same for me. I've thrown a few different ideas out there, but the summer was, on some ways it was average, and in some ways there were a few events that made it seem like it was pretty dramatic. You know, we had basically everything you would think about having in the summer. We had a few hot days, maybe not as many as we usually have, and a few of those cooler days and some scattered summertime thunderstorms and hurricane here and there. But everything always makes me think about how is this going to play into the fall, and what impact is the previous weather potentially going to have on the future.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, even for here, it's been a pretty normal summertime. I mean, temperatures here in the foothills, we don't really get above 90 a lot, and we didn't do that. I wrote down 10 days. I was going back through some of our stuff on our weather station at the office, and it only recorded 10 days above 90 degrees. So, I mean, that's fairly normal for the foothills. And rain-wise, we were spotty. We may not have got as much rain as the western part of the county. So overall, it was a fairly normal summer. So, and that can only parlay. We have no idea what that parlays into in fall and the wintertime. So for our area, it was fairly normal. And Chris, I know you guys as well. It's been fairly normal up there for you guys. A little warmer in June, but besides that, it's been pretty good.
Yeah, that's right. And then we talked about the fluctuation. Just, one month was one in the top 10 warmest, 1 month was in the top 10 coolest. So when you average it out, it seems normal. But like we were talking about, there's just certain events that make it seem not so quote unquote normal.
That's right. I always love to tell people there's 2 things I love in weather. You have to watch the trends, and when everything's over with, Mother Nature seems to balance herself out. So that's just normally how it goes. So we'll kind of wrap up there. I'll let our guests, Chris and Brad, I'll let you guys kind of plug your social media outlets and stuff like that, and then we'll close the show out. Chris, you want to do first?
Yeah, I'll go first. My Facebook page is Chris Michaels WCYB, and my Twitter is at WCYB_Michaels, and as you can tell from this, I like to talk too much, so just hit me up on either of those outlets and we'll talk, I'm sure.
And Brad?
All right, you can find me on Twitter at WXBrad, and on Facebook, Brad Panovich WCNC, but you can search WXBrad on Facebook. Usually it'll go to my Facebook page. I need some more likes. I'm almost at 30,000, so like a big milestone for my Facebook page. So go check me out there. And, of course, my blog is WXBrad.com. which I'll probably start posting some fall stuff here, and eventually we'll have the winter outlook up there towards the end of October.
Yeah, and Chris, I don't know if you've ever seen Brad's stuff, but everybody in the Charlotte media, we always love to see the snow meter, and he has a snowman. It's really cool to see. So when we see Brad
designing that this year, so I have to build that because we have a new look, graphics look. So I'm gonna add some things to this year, make it kind of cool.
Awesome. Now I'll keep an eye out for it.
When we're watching Brad on TV and he does his little weather tease, before his main segment, he always mentions the snow meter. Everybody gets all excited. So
I think I changed it once when I was shooting a tape down there. I think I changed it to Rookie Snow Meter just to.
And
awesome.
The funny thing about that, and just like offshoot, is in the social science back. So part of that is fun. It really is fun. But there's a little bit of science to that because the social aspect of it is people get the 0 to 10 scale on snow chances, and so a lot of people, my hardcore weather geek friends, are like, it's gimmicky, and then people that aren't into weather geek stuff thinks it's cool. But in some ways, it kind of serves both audiences because it really is my professional opinion what I think these snow chances are, but I put it in layman's terms so everyone can get and understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, and I'll go ahead and plug October 15th. I think is when we got Brad for the social science aspect as we talk about that on our show. And I think that Joey was working on getting Nate Johnson as well.
Let's say we got to grab Nate. If that's going to be a show on social science, we got to grab Nate somehow.
Yeah, I think
he's okay.
And Chris, you can. I mean, we consider you as our regular panelist, so I know you and Nate have a great relationship. So I know we're gonna have Brad and Grant Gilmore from Greenville or Greensboro. So that would be awesome to have Nate on. So that is October 15th. Daniel, I'll kind of before we wrap up the show and talk about next week, do you want to kind of talk about how our Hurricane Hugo episode? It really got some rave reviews over the past week.
Scotty, you're correct. I'll tell you what, we put a lot of work into that Hugo show we did last week, and we got a really good response. Last I looked, we was approaching 500 views on Facebook, or not Facebook, excuse me, YouTube. Some of that's live, and some of course, you watch on replay. But overall, the reaction was really great, and big kudos to Eric and Rob and Tom for coming on with us and taking their time out, because their stations did all kind of stuff too, and for them to take some time to be with us, we really appreciate that. But that I've said it plenty of times, that was the benchmark weather event for this part of the country, and we thank everyone for watching, and I hope we've gained some new viewers off of that, some regulars, and anytime you got any discussions or any suggestions on anything that you want us to do, let us know. Let us know on the Facebook page, Carolina Weather Group, or shoot one of us an email, and we'll get to work on it.
Most definitely. And before Ricky kind of ends his part, I kind of piggyback off what Daniel said. We're approaching our 1-year anniversary, and I think our social science show is going to be just as good as Hugo's show. We're really looking forward to that. We're going to be promoting it as well, so that's something that is going to be awesome to see. And Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the South Carolina Emergency Management even tweeted out our show. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, we had a lot of people, including South Carolina Emergency Management. They was reading some of our stuff and retweeted it and help get the word out. So we thank them very much.
Awesome. Good deal. All right, Ricky, I'll kind of let you close out your area, and I'll talk about next week's show, and we'll be done for the night.
All right. Well, eventually, as we go into the weekend, hopefully we start to get back to the period of some more, maybe calmer weather. It's kind of been pretty calm around here if you don't include the mist, but hopefully a nicer weekend coming up. We have a Charlotte football game on Saturday, so looks a lot cooler than the last one we had with temperatures in the 90s. This one looks to be in the 70s. So a lot nicer for that. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at WXRJM. And maybe I'll be tweeting about a meeting we're having tomorrow in Charlotte. I don't know what the policy is on that, but we'll figure it out when we get there. So
Awesome.
We'll tweet. Don't worry, Ricky.
I figured as much. Panovich is going, so usually that means he's going to tweet about it. So
yeah, I'll be curious if they'll let us take pictures. That's what I really want to know.
That's awesome. Sounds interesting. I can't wait to see the tweets then. Next week, we're going to have Chris back on the show. We're also going to have Patrick Ellis from WECT, I think is the call letters out in Greenville, North Carolina, as we discuss SPC outlooks, and that's always an interesting topic. So we're going to be talking about that as we head into the fall season. As I talked about a little bit earlier, we have a little ramp up in severe weather, so that'll be kind of a good thing to get a refresher course on what all that means as we discuss that next week. So for everyone who joined us on our panel tonight, thank you guys, Brad, Chris, thank you for coming on. Daniel and Ricky, I know you've had a busy day today, so thank you guys for coming on. And thanks to Austin, who is running behind the scenes work as he is doing some work behind the scenes, but also running the show tonight. Thank you for doing that, Austin. So everyone, thanks for watching. Join us next Wednesday night on the Carolinas Weather Group. And until then, have a great week.